Hey, Amy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So for those listening, you haven't met Amy yet. Dr. Amy Cannatta is the #1 international best-selling author of Perspective, From Ruin to Resilience, and she writes for the Huffington Post. She's passionate about teaching you how changing your perspective can turn tragedy into personal transformation. Amy, tell us about your background, how you got started as a writer.
Well, you know what's really funny is that ever since I was 13 years old, everyone around me, like my family and friends, said, you should really write a book based on what I've gone through in my life. And as a 13-year-old, I'm like, I don't think so. And then as time went on, I kept being told that over and over and over again. And I just kept thinking, well, who am I to write a book? I'm not famous. I'm not Oprah. Like, who cares about my life? Really? Who cares? Right. And the way that it happened was really sort of funny. How that I became a writer, I should say, how I became an author, because I think there's a difference between being a writer and being an author. And I can talk about what I think the differences are. But how I became an author is really kind of funny. 2 years ago, I actually entered a speaking competition. And for the very first time, I shared my story publicly about overcoming domestic violence and how I did that while I was going through chiropractic school to become a doctor, and how I did that with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and just juggled all of that stuff. And so I came forward for the very first time and shared that story in a really big way in front of 100 business women as part of this speaking competition. And I ended up winning the speaking competition, and I ended up getting a standing ovation for my talk. And afterwards, there were several people that came up to me and said, you should really write a book. Like, there's other women and other people out there that are struggling that really want to hear your message of resilience, which is really my core message, is how to pick yourself back up again, and how I've done it over and over again in my life, with some very simple tools. And so afterwards I went home, and this was like December. I went home and I just said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to write a book. Why not? Like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And as soon as I said yes, it was as if, for lack of, whatever you believe in, if you believe in God or the universe or your higher self or whatever, it was as if, or your angels or whatever, it was as if they were waiting for me to say yes, because the very next day, the words started pouring out of me like a faucet, and I just couldn't stop. I would be driving to work and I would be dictating into my Bluetooth through my car. Like, it literally, the book wrote itself in 4 months. I published the book, and it went to #1 on Amazon in less than 1 year. From the time I started writing to the time I got it published and marketed it and all that stuff, it was less than a year later. And it really happened so fast that I feel like, because it's kind of like the supernatural thing that happened. It was literally like God or the universe was just waiting for me to kind of step up.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I found that's the case with a lot of writers. Like, we talk about, like, channeling your book, right? It's like, yeah, you were there, like, going through the motions, but it wasn't really like your mind that was writing the book, right? It's like something deeper going on, right? So, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, you had this message for your book, and you opened it up in that speech, and you share your vulnerability, you shared your story. But like, writing the book, I mean, what did you learn through that process? How did that process kind of help you with, your life in general, beyond just having a book?
Oh my gosh, it has helped me in so many ways. And I'm chuckling because writing the book was like, I have to say, that was like the easy part. Looking back on it now, that was like the easy part, because literally every day I would wake up, and I'm not a morning person. So for me to wake up without an alarm at 5 o'clock in the morning is not normal. Like, that's totally not normal for me. But I would wake up at 5 o'clock, and I would go to, I had this like kind of like a sitting room area, and I would go there, and this was just my process, was I would pray, and I would just say, allow me to be an open and clear channel of your words. Like, pour your words into my head, out my hands, and allow me to write what you want me to write. Every day, that's what I would say. And so I just started writing. I know some people, they start out with an outline. I didn't have an outline. I didn't know which direction this book was going to go in. I just started writing it. And as I was writing it, I learned so much about myself in the process, because as I was writing it, there were so many healing moments for me that when I talked about resilience, that I had to think about and kind of like relive memories. And some of them were happy memories that would cause me to cry. Like, I talk about my dad teaching me how to ride a bike and how I fell off the bike, and how riding a bike teaches us resilience because we have to get back up and on it. And I just remember writing that chapter, and my dad and I haven't always been close. And I remember writing that chapter, and it's like one really fond memory I have of my father. And I just remember just writing it, just sobbing, because I was like, wow, that was the one moment in time, one of the moments in time in my life where I felt really connected to my dad. And it just brought up a lot of emotions. And I don't know, you probably hear this from writers a lot, is that as you're writing, you realize you're doing your own healing on some of these things.
Absolutely. I mean, I've definitely noticed that. I mean, writing a book is totally a healing process. I mean, there's studies on it. We've actually had guests talk about, the research behind how writing can help you heal from trauma and PTSD and things like that. So, I mean, there's tons of research and experience around that, and testimonials around that, which is amazing, right? I mean, it's amazing for me to think that, like, our career, the work that we do as authors, as writers, is not only helping other people, but it's like healing us. It's like the work itself is not just a gift to the world, it's also a gift to yourself. Right. And I know in your book, you talk about like resilience, right? And why it's so important to take care of yourself, right? Can you tell us about like why? Like, why are you writing about resilience? Why is it important, and how do we get more of it?
That's a great question. I think the reason that it's so important is because it's universal. And whether you think you have resilience, like I would consider myself a resilient person, but I'm always looking for ways to become more resilient, because after looking at a lot of and studying a lot of successful people like Tony Robbins and Oprah Winfrey and Steve Jobs and Richard Branson, like studying those people, those highly successful people, what is the one thing that they have in common that has made them successful? And that is their resilience. It comes down to that one word. It's the ability for us to pick ourselves back up again after we've failed. And the quicker we can do that, the more time we can spend on doing the things that we are called and born to do. And if I can teach people how to become more resilient so that they don't wallow in the depression of failing, or they don't get stuck, or parents can teach their kids how to be more resilient in life, like it's just a good skill to have, because whether you are an entrepreneur, writer, speaker, corporate, there's going to be times in your life when you disagree with people, when things don't go your way, and you have to be resilient, whether it's an argument with someone, whether you get a horrible diagnosis, or something happens, or you have a death in the family, whatever it is, you have to pick yourself back up again. And the way to kind of do that is, there's multiple ways, and I think resilience is kind of the big broad umbrella, and it depends on what you're going through. But one of the ways that I challenge my own resilient muscle is that I practice resilience every day. It's kind of become part of my spiritual practice, and that's what my next book is about, which is I'm really excited about. Is practicing this every day. So part of becoming more resilient is choosing to do something, one little thing every day that you were slightly afraid to do the day before. Because when you can step out of your comfort zone and do something that is uncomfortable and unknown, that's where you're going to grow. So it's not always in times of like struggle or suffering or hard times, but becoming more resilient is also putting yourself in, as Brene Brown calls it, the arena, putting yourself in the arena of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable so that you can grow. So for example, one of the things might be getting on and doing your first Facebook Live video. I mean, because you're afraid to do video, like do a 1-minute video if you're afraid. Start small, but start doing something that will help you grow and develop your resiliency muscle. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it sounds funny or corny, but I've been taking cold showers, right? Because one of my mentors is Ben Greenfield for health. And I was always talking about cold showers. How it's good for you. It helps you sleep better. And I used to hate cold showers. I mean, I could not stand it. It was just like so miserable. But now, like I do a cold shower every day. I love it. Like it's every time I'm like a little bit afraid of it or I'm a little bit scared. Like I don't want to do it. I'm just like, toughen up. Like you gotta go through this, right? And I think those little things, it sounds so small, it sounds so simple, but I think you're right. Like if you do something every day, you approach that fear every day, you start to realize that your mind is just telling you all this stuff that's not really true, right? Because the cold shower isn't going to hurt you. It's not going to, make you sick or whatever. And in fact,
you're not going to die,
you, right?
Yeah, that's always my litmus test for everything. If I do this, am I going to die? Like, is there a potential that I'm going to die? If that's not a potential, then it's like, what do I have to lose then?
Yeah.
Nothing to lose.
That's awesome.
So I love the cold showers. It sounds invigorating, actually.
It is. Yeah, it's like being on a waterfall. If you're on a waterfall and it's like cold, but it's like feels so good. It's just like that. Yeah. It's like your own waterfall in your house.
Oh, I love it.
So talking about resilience, can you tell us about people who don't have it? Like, what are some signs of someone who they really need resilience and you can tell because this is what happens or this is how they act?
That's another great question. One of the biggest hallmarks is someone who is constantly in a state of struggling, or someone who has got a reason or an excuse not to do something all the time. Someone who is, and I know like there's a difference with being clinically depressed but someone who's down all the time, who can never see the positive. You'll talk to those people, they're just like always down, or they're always making an excuse why they can't start their business, why they can't do that, why they, so I would say those are probably the biggest things that stick out. Or the people that, and this is me, this was me for a while. I felt like I couldn't get out of my own way. In the sense that I kept feeling like I was spinning my wheels. Like I would look at my life. Like I always do a life evaluation at the end of the year. So like right now I'm kind of like evaluating, how did this year go for me? What do I want my goals to be for 2017? Things like that. And if I look at that and I say to myself, you know what? I haven't really moved the needle much this year. I've kind of spun my wheels a little bit. It's a good opportunity for me to look at, well, where was I spinning my wheels? Where could I have improved? And that goes along with asking yourself different questions, like to get different answers, which will lead you to bigger and better results, right? So, which is part of being resilient. So that's what so for a long time, so just to share a little bit, for a long time, I was spinning my wheels because we had a family tragedy happen. It'll be, oh my gosh, 4 years ago now. My 4.5-year-old nephew passed away suddenly in his sleep a week before he was supposed to turn 5 years old. And he was more than a nephew. He was kind of like my son. The long story short is that he lost his mom. He was premature. He lost his mom about a week after childbirth because she had a fluke heart attack at 37 years old and passed away. And So my brother ended up kind of moving in with my mom and I and my girls, and we kind of helped raise him. So we took it really hard. And for a year, I was grieving. Like, I was grieving the loss of my nephew because he was kind of like my son. And really, I would say, wallowing in the grief. I hadn't processed it. I hadn't taken steps to process it. And that was a time in my life, looking back on it now, I needed to take a dose of my own medicine, and what I actually teach all the time, which is to reach out and get, like, I should have reached out and gotten some help rather than kind of stay in that state for a year of just depressed and just like going through the motions of life, but being very withdrawn from everyone, my family. I would say I was probably clinically depressed, and I didn't get any help for a while, like things like that. I definitely wish I had handled that a little bit differently looking back on it now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I was depressed too. Like when I was in college, I was very depressed. And, I remember going through that time. It's like you don't even know who, like I wanted help, but like I didn't know who to reach out to, or like, who do you call? What do you say? Right. And so how do you know, like when you're in that situation, you're feeling so isolated, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling like life is just, kind of crumbling around you. Who do you go to for help?
Well, and from what I've learned, and I'm not by any means a mental health professional, but from what I've learned is that there are warning signs of true clinical depression when you need to actually go get a therapist, go see your doctor and get on antidepressant medication. And I think there's websites out there on like if you Googled like warning signs of like when you need to go see your doctor, I think it's like being down for more than 6 months. There's some warning signs there. And that's what I ended up doing, was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not snapping out of this. Like I finally realized like I'm not snapping out of this. And so for me, I went and started talking to someone. I went to a therapist and started getting some of that grief out. For me, I wasn't ready to even process the grief. The grief was way too painful. I couldn't even get the words out that, like, I couldn't even say my nephew died without completely falling apart. So to even be around a therapist, I wasn't even ready for that. But you get to this point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live my life like this. Like I can't walk around sad all the time. This is not gonna work. So what do? Talk to a friend, talk to a therapist, get a different perspective. Like that was also like a key for me, was talking to a friend of mine who knows me really well. And she's like, Amy, yeah, I wanted to tell you something. I wanted to say, you need to get help, but I didn't want to step on your toes. And I said to her, I wish you would have said something to me, because I kind of needed that as a wake-up call, like to realize, yeah, I was really more depressed than I thought I was. So, I mean, I guess that's the best advice I can give as a non-mental health care provider is just knowing your own self, and knowing when you need to wave the white flag, and then just starting to reach out to people you trust. And if you don't have a therapist, you can start asking people that you trust. Do you have a therapist? Do you know someone? Is there anyone you can refer me to? I'm kind of struggling. You don't have to even tell them what you're struggling with. But just I would say the first step is really taking that brave, bold step and asking for help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I mean, that's, I found that to be kind of the secret to success in like every area of life, is just asking for help, right? Like asking for advice. Mm-hmm. You'd be amazed how helpful people are, right? Because
exactly.
You can be in traffic all day and people flick you off, and people get upset and angry and irritated, and there's people who get upset in certain situations in life, but the vast majority of people, if you just go to them honestly asking for help, asking for advice, they want to help you out, right? They want to help you, guide you in the right direction. And so that's what I found to be very helpful in business and health and emotions and everything, is just ask for help. You'd be amazed how far you'll go if you just do that.
Yeah. And also, thinking about this one step further is kind of like owning where you are, like being okay to admit that you need help. And I think this is especially hard for people like me, like I'm waving my hand up in the air on this one, who have been high achievers or are high achievers, are leaders, are capable, have accomplished a lot in our lives. It's really difficult for us to admit that we need help. And so I've gotten, and this is part of the resilient process, is being non-judgmental towards yourself and just saying, almost like forgiving yourself and just saying, I'm okay with needing help. Like, and I am admitting I need help. I'm admitting I'm not an expert. So I said this the other day. It's funny. I said this the other day. I said, as much as I'm an expert, like I'm a doctor, so I'm considered an expert of the spine. I'm a chiropractor. I know neuromusculoskeletal, like it's the back of my hand. I know biomechanics. I know muscles. I know, nerves. I know all that stuff. But when I first got into entrepreneurship, I had to admit that I was a kindergartner when it came to what is an email funnel? What is MailChimp? Like I had to, and so owning that I didn't know what I didn't know and just being humble about, I don't know, instead of being like, I'm the doctor, I know, okay, yeah, I you don't need to teach me that. I know that. It's like, no, you have to own where you are. And being non-judgmental with yourself about where you are and being very humble and just kind of owning that and just saying, you know what, I admit I need help. I don't know what an email funnel is. I don't know what MailChimp is. I don't know what Zoom is. I didn't know what any of this stuff was, 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
So I think that's part of being resilient.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think I found that just like the ego is like what gets in the way, right? Because you say, oh, I'm a successful doctor or chiropractor or author or whatever. And then you you have this like image to look up to. And so you can't be vulnerable and ask people like, oh, hey, I need help. How do I write my book or start my email list or do whatever. Right.
Right.
And what I've found is that like, as I've learned to overcome that ego and grow out of that and be more humble, like I'm actually asking for help more now. Like even the more successful I get, the more often, like every day I'm asking people for help and advice. And I think it's just helping me be successful even faster, right? Because that is the paradox of it. And I've done the same thing. I'm laughing because I'm doing the same thing. The more successful I get, the more I ask for help and the more I delegate, which is really kind of cool. Because then you start to build your momentum faster and you start to grow faster. And if I knew this, if I knew then what I know now, oh my gosh, I would have done my chiropractic practice differently. I would have got help. I would have gotten help sooner with a lot of things instead of thinking, I am a high achiever. I'm highly capable. I can do this myself. Like I've always been that way ever since I was 5 years old. I can do it myself, Mom. And, and sometimes it's gotten me into trouble because I think that, like you said, I totally agree with, I would have been more successful even faster had I asked for help. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So you talked earlier about some questions that you ask yourself, right? So I want to come back to that. What are some of the questions that you ask yourself to overcome tough situations or just, solve problems or improve your life in some way?
Oh my gosh. Love it. I love this question. Because first of all, I want to start out by answering it with what not to ask yourself, what not to say to yourself. So typically when we are in a state of, let's say, being stuck or things not working out the way we want, or maybe our business isn't as far along as we want, or maybe we're just stuck on something. Typically, what the human mind wants to ask ourselves is this question: why isn't this working? That's like one of the most typical questions that I was asking myself. And it's a typical question that I hear people say, yep, that's me too. Why isn't this working? The problem with that question is that it focuses on what's already done in the past. What isn't working. You're focusing your energy on what isn't working. Why isn't this working? You're trying to figure out why it isn't working. So you're spending your energy on the why isn't it working. So instead of asking yourself that question and spending mental energy on, because it doesn't matter why, right? It's just whatever it is, it's not working. Whether you haven't signed a client in a long time or something, you've got stuck on something, it's not working. So let's move on to a better question. Better question would be, and this is one that I ask myself, what am I not seeing here? What can I do differently? Who can I reach out to for help? Who can I reach out to run this by that might have a different perspective, that might be able to look at this differently and give me a different solution to how I can move forward? So those are the questions that I now ask myself, those few questions. And that's what moves the needle quicker. So I'm not spending time on the why isn't this working? Why am I stuck? Why is everyone else successful and not me? It is, who can I reach out to get a different perspective? What can I do differently? What am I not seeing here that might lend me to a different answer and a different result? What help can I get? What resources? That focuses on being proactive and being in a forward motion versus looking back at what isn't working.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like, this resilience is really all about, like you said, like getting unstuck, right? And I love those questions because that's exactly what it sounds like they're doing, is helping you get unstuck from a situation that's not working. Instead of focusing on the situation, focusing on what you can do, what you can control to improve the situation and to move your life forward.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So, I know you do coaching and consulting and you work with a lot of clients on this stuff. What is kind of the biggest challenge you've seen with your clients? What is the biggest problem they have that you help them overcome?
Right off the top of my head, their mindset and getting out of their own way. That's the biggest thing. And when I say getting out of their own way, what I mean by that is, to clarify, what I mean by that is the how am I going to do this? Who am I to do this? What if I fail? What if this happens? What if, I'll give you a perfect example and I'll use myself as the example. 6 months ago, I didn't have my own podcast. And it was and the reason I had thought about it, I had wanted to do it, but all these things kept going through my head of, well, what if I don't get any guests on? And what if I fall flat on my face? And what if I don't know what to ask? And what if I don't have content? What if that was me getting in my own way? And that's the same thing I see with a lot of my clients is, and they're highly successful people, but where they get hung up is their mindset, especially when they are in a growth phase, when they're about to, most of them have a business and they're getting ready to, the industry word is up level. They think, how can I do this? I'm scared. What if I get too busy and then I'm not myself? What if I get too successful? What if I get swamped with work and I don't have a team? What if? Those what ifs are I would say the number one most common thing that I see. And so I refer to it as getting in our own way or our mindset. And that's the biggest thing that I see as a coach and what I coach a lot of my clients. That's kind of where we start. It's like teasing that out.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you go through that process? How do you get out of your own way?
Oh, really diving in deep to why it's there. So getting into the, all right, where's your resistance coming from? What are you telling yourself? Where is that coming from? Is it based on any fact? Do you have experience that will back up what you are thinking? Like, are there times in your life where there was some sort of evidence that said you weren't good enough to do this? And then, okay, so let's look at that. Well, who told you that? Where did you learn that? But did you really feel that about yourself? Like, we just really dive in deep into that. And most of the time, I shouldn't say most of the time, all the time, they experience really big breakthroughs just by examining and really looking at the things that have been holding them back, the things that they've been telling themselves from a different perspective. When we're allowed to walk into those things in a safe environment with someone like a coach that is there to kind of hold the space for us to look at these things that maybe we've never looked at in our lives. Maybe we've never really examined where our beliefs come from a different perspective. They have their own aha moments where they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been doing this to myself for all these years. Like, I've been telling myself all these years that I wasn't smart enough. No one else told me that. Like, they have these big breakthroughs, but it just takes having someone else walking them through the process in a really safe, supported, atmosphere where they know that they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be ridiculed, that we all go through the same thing. I would say that's the biggest thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, it reminds me of Socrates. He said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Right? And I love like what you're teaching, about resilience and asking these questions is like really examining your life to figure out, okay, like how do we move forward here? And I'm a huge proponent of that as well. I mean, I've got a whole list of questions I ask myself, and I'll definitely be adding some of yours to that list. But I think that's just crucial, is that, you have to be kind of your own coach in a way. Like, you need to ask for help from other people and work with other people, right? You can't just be all by yourself. But at the same time, like you said, with that mindset, you have to kind of learn the skills, the resilient skills like you're teaching, to be able to ask yourself those questions, to examine your own life, to learn your own lessons so that you don't get stuck and just stay there.
Exactly. And it's all about your perspective. And that's what it's part of my book and part of my message is when we can shift our perspective and look at things differently, it leads us to create different questions or make different questions in our minds, I shouldn't say that. The questions usually come first, which help to shift our perspective. And then once our perspective is shifted, we get different answers. And then those answers lead us down a different path of a different result. And that's where the big breakthroughs come and where the lasting change comes from. So, I overcame domestic violence. And when I got out of that situation, I felt like my life was ruined. And if I sat and looked at feeling like my life was ruined, and I thought, I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is just in ashes. It's just in shambles. Everything is just completely fallen apart. And I remember when I was thinking that one time, I'm like, wait a minute. This is my opportunity to start over with a clean slate and rebuild my life the way I want it. And just that simple shift in, wait a minute, like I almost gave myself this mental timeout where I said, time out. Like, no, it may feel like it's in shambles, but it's all in how you look at it. And it can be a beautiful beginning to you actually making the choices for yourself versus having someone having made every single choice for me, down to the clothes I wore that day and how I had my hair and all that stuff. What kind of coffee that I was drinking, like all that stuff. I felt empowered. It was in that moment of like, oh my gosh, I now have complete control over every choice and every decision. And I just remember like it being, as much as it felt like a total uphill battle of like rebuilding my life, I was like, but I'm in the driver's seat now. I don't have to drink this kind of coffee anymore if I don't want to. I can wear what I want to. I can do my hair the way I want to. I felt really empowered, as much as I was like, how am I going to do this as a single mom? And there was all that other stuff to process. But in that one moment, just that simple switch and that simple timeout that I gave myself and that simple shift in perspective made a world of difference.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us today, Amy, and your story. It's been awesome. I mean, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Best place to find me is my website, amycannatta.com. That's AMYCANNATTA.com. And if they go to my website as well, if they type in amycannatta.com/RR, which stands for Relentless Resilience, they can get a copy of my Relentless Resilience guide and workbook, which will take them through the simple steps that I use, that I've used over and over and over and over again in my life to overcome being stuck and be more successful and bring my ideas into my reality of my life, so that they're welcome to go there. And they can also find me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook all the time. So Amy Cannatta or Dr. Amy Cannatta, they can find me there too.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was awesome.